This is Heliox, where evidence meets empathy. Independent, moderated, timely, deep, gentle, clinical, global, and community conversations about things that matter. Breathe easy. We go deep and lightly surface the big ideas. All right, let's get into this. We're doing a deep dive today into, well, a pretty fascinating figure in the business world, someone who's pushing for a, frankly, radical shift towards sustainability, even when it seems like the tide's going the other way.
Right. We're talking about Andre Hoffman. The source material we have is really centered on him. He's the vice chairman at Roche and a key voice for the family shareholders there.
Yeah, and our mission here is to sort of unpack all that. Hoffman's background, what exactly he's arguing, what he's actually doing, and also look at the challenges, because trying this inside a giant company like Roche, well, it's not easy.
Definitely not. And ultimately, what does all this tell us, about that tension, the classic business model versus the urgent need for sustainability?
And we should find some surprising personal bits along the way, things from his past, the company's past, that really shaped how he sees things now.
For sure.
So let's maybe set the scene first. The material we've looked at, it points towards this trend, especially noticeable, it seems, since the Trump presidency, where, business leaders actually backed off talking publicly about sustainability.
Yeah, that's right. There seems to be this kind of calculation, almost a fear of upsetting political figures. Figures who might favor, let's say, looser environmental rules. Some execs might even see weaker rules as, well, better for business short term.
But Hoffman just stands right out in contrast to that, doesn't he? He's like a clear exception here. He's not just paying lip service. He's actively trying to get companies to build sustainability into their actual core business, not just some side project.
Exactly. And his position, that gives him a pretty unique vantage point. Vice chairman of Roche, great-grandson of the founder, speaking for the family shareholders. He's got real weight inside one of the world's biggest pharma companies. That alone makes his push really interesting to watch.
It really does. So you have to ask, okay, where does this drive actually come from? The sources trace it way back. It's deeply personal.
Oh, absolutely. Just picture this. Growing up in the Camargue, southern France, basically living on a nature reserve or research station focused on birds. That was his childhood. It bound to give you a pretty profound connection to nature right from the start.
And his father's influence, Luke Hoffman, a biologist, co-founder of the WWF, that looms large.
Huge. Andre apparently talks about growing up mostly in WWF T-shirts and carrying WWF bags. It wasn't just like a hobby. It was embedded in his life.
And the family didn't just talk about it. The Meva Foundation, their foundation.
Yeah, funneled over £1 billion into conservation before it wound down a couple of years back. Funding all sorts of projects, from big international stuff down to, preserving one specific island for turns on Lake Geneva.
So, okay, protecting species, preserving habitats, that sounds like classic conservation. Important stuff. But what's really interesting is how the material shows his thinking evolved. He sort of moved beyond just saving the rhino, so to speak.
Right. While that's still vital, he now sees the bigger challenge as changing the whole economic system. Stopping the resource exploitation and habitat destruction before it happens, getting upstream of the problem.
And that leads him to this core idea, the one that seems to underpin everything he's doing now.
Nature needs a price tag.
Right. What does that actually mean in practice?
Well, his point is, if companies don't quantify the financial cost of environmental damage, climate change, biodiversity loss, all of it, then they just don't have the real incentive to change how they operate. If it doesn't hit the balance sheet, it's basically invisible, right? Ignored by the bottom line.
So it's not just be green, it's make being green economically visible and rational. How's he trying to push that idea forward then? It's not like he has one single theory.
No, it seems less about a single theory and more about guiding people, future leaders, academics, trying to shift the whole way they think about business. So he's putting serious money into education. Funding whole departments, professorships at top schools like INSEAD in France, the Geneva Graduate Institute.
Targeting the mindset. Starting early.
Exactly. He's trying to shape the thinking of the next generation of leaders.
He even co-wrote a book, didn't he? A New Nature of Business.
Yeah, with Peter Vanham. Sounds like it mixes his own story, examples from companies Roche, obviously, but also wholesome IKEA, and maybe gets a bit technical. The source mentioned a potential alphabet soup of abbreviations.
Huh. Okay, so
Yeah.
maybe diving into the weeds a bit.
Seems like it.
Hmm.
But it suggests he's trying to ground it in real-world stuff, even if it gets complex, showing it's not just talk.
And he uses his own life to show commitment, too, like his vineyard.
Oh, yeah, the vineyard in Yvonne, Rhone Valley. He's actively converting it to organic.
That's pretty hands-on.
It really is. It's like a mini case study, isn't it? Showing other vintners, look, this is possible. A different model can work. He's willing to, get his hands dirty to prove it.
And his own path is kind of interesting, too. Started in medicine.
Yeah, then switched to economics. Didn't finish that, apparently, but got an MBA later from INSEAD. He calls himself a non-grad post-grad, which is quite funny.
A bit unusual.
And he spent time in London, was involved with that new Covent Garden soup company startup way back when.
Selling soup in cartons, that was new then.
Right. Apparently, a colleague remembered him as, authentic, really committed as an investor, always taking notes. Paints a picture, doesn't it? Analytical, practical, dedicated.
So you've got this deep nature connection, this evolving philosophy on sustainable economics, and then he brings all that into Roche, which, as the sources say, is this hybrid company. That's where things must get tricky.
Oh, for sure. Because it's not 100% family-owned, but it's not your typical listed company either, just chasing quarterly profits. That creates this inherent tension, doesn't it? Balancing his long-term sustainability vision with the constant drumbeat from the financial markets, especially that expectation of rising dividends every year.
And he talks about that tension directly in the material. It's quite candid.
Yeah, he basically says, look, as a family, we don't need any more money. But, he adds, all shareholders get the dividend. We have to satisfy the financial markets to keep everyone happy.
He sees it as necessary, right? For stability, for R&D investment, for weathering storms in the pharma business.
Exactly. Without that financial help, the long-term stuff just isn't feasible anyway. It shows that even with massive family influence, market realities bite.
There's also that great little story about how people inside Roche first reacted to his sustainability push.
Oh yeah, the birdhouses.
Yeah.
He said people kind of misunderstood at first, thought, aha, the owner likes nature, and their big response was to put up birdhouses all around the area.
Which is nice, I guess, but maybe slightly missing the scale of change he had in mind.
Just slightly. He had to clarify that his real goal, his big ambition for Roche, is much more fundamental. It's about integrating the financial reports and the sustainability reports.
So they're not separate things anymore.
Exactly. Ideally, one single statement that shows cash flows and impacts together. Though he admits, that's a huge task. Might take generations.
Wow, that's a vision for real accountability, though. Putting environmental stuff truly on par with the financials. The sources also talk about the family's role, that long-term ownership.
Yeah, they really think long-term, generations.
Yeah.
He mentions his father Luke's style was like supervision from a distance. Someone who brought home the vitamin pills, but also felt he had to save the world. That dual sense of purpose seems ingrained.
And that Novartis takeover attempt back in 2003? That sounds like a massive moment.
Huge. A real wake-up call, apparently. It forced the family to really ask themselves, are we actually the right owners for this company? Made them realize they needed more than just collecting dividends. They needed a proper long-term strategy for their ownership.
And they acted on it. The material mentions they bought back Novartis' shares in 2021.
Right. Consolidating their position, boosting their voting rights to about 2/3. That gives them serious clout to push that long-term vision.
Which ties into his idea of ownership is a duty.
Exactly. He stresses the family's commitment, but also the responsibility that comes with that power. They have to ensure the company has strong leadership. It's not okay, he thinks, if their influence just props up mediocrity.
So looking forward, the material touches briefly on the next generation, the fifth generation potentially getting involved.
Yeah, the succession question. And it also reiterates that his goals go way beyond just Roche. He's trying to push this thinking across the whole business world.
And his own retirement. Seems he might not follow his step-grandfather's example of working past 90.
Seems unlikely, yeah. Maybe he feels the urgency, that there's too much to do, and the clock's ticking on making these big systemic changes.
So if we pull this all together, Andre Hoffman's core message coming through these sources seems to be that sustainability isn't just, a nice add-on or a moral issue. For a major business player like him, it's presented as purely rational, necessary for long-term survival, really.
Absolutely. And he's in this unique spot, isn't he? Holding power from inside the company and through the family ownership. And he's using that influence in specific ways: education, pushing for integrated reporting, trying to fundamentally change the rules of the game.
Which kind of leaves us with a big question to chew on, doesn't it? Given how relentless the pressure is on public companies for short-term results, those dividends, the quarterly numbers, can even really powerful long-term owners like the Hoffman family truly shift the system? Can they genuinely integrate environmental and social costs into the core decisions?
Or is that traditional financial gravity just too strong in the end? Does the demand for short-term financial performance always win out? And what is Hoffman's whole effort, his strategy, tell us about the real chances and maybe the specific leverage points for making sustainable business happen more broadly against those powerful market forces? Thanks for listening today. 4 recurring narratives underlie every episode: boundary dissolution, adaptive complexity, embodied knowledge, and quantum-like uncertainty. These aren't just philosophical musings, but frameworks for understanding our modern world. We hope you continue exploring our other podcasts, responding to the content, and checking out our related articles at helioxpodcast.substack.com.